Hello, everybody, and welcome to another one of our Flexa webinars. Really excited to have you here today talking about a really interesting and very much of the moment kind of topic around employer branding and recruitment marketing, which are two different things. That will be one of the things that we're discussing today. I've got the most fantastic panel here with me today, but just by way of introduction, before I hand over to them, I'm Molly. I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders of Flexa. Flexa is an employer brand platform, relevantly, that enables your company to get discovered for what makes it unique based on employee feedback and enables individuals to search for companies based on what they really care about. So people interact with us a little bit like they would Airbnb, dog-friendly cottage with a hot tub, all the properties come up. Hybrid company, great focus on career progression and brilliant parental leave, all of the companies that match that come up. We have over 3.2 million users all over the world, and people are conducting over 500,000 searches every single month for their ideal employers. So thank you so much for joining us to talk all things employer branding and recruitment marketing, because I think it's something that people have really struggled to measure success on. And I think often everyone just defaults to, oh, it's just about getting more applications, but it is so much more than that. So I'm going to hand over to our lovely panelists to introduce themselves and their roles. Anna, would you like to go first?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Really pleased to be speaking alongside such great people today. My name is Anna. I've got about 12 years in total experience across talent and people. I basically cut my teeth in the beginning in the agency side of things, pure recruitment, and then slowly moved in-house. My first rodeo was over at Google, and afterwards I went to Trainline, and that was followed by Twilio. And these days I'm basically the head of people and talent at Sapi. And could confidently say this is my favorite opportunity so far, just building from scratch. So that's me. Thanks a lot.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Brenton, would you like to go next?
Yeah, thanks for having me. My name is Brenton Collins. I'm recruitment marketing and employer brand for Walmart US. I've been in the marketing, advertising, and recruitment marketing space for roughly 20 years. So I can't wait to kind of talk through some of this. It's one of my favorite topics, very passionate. So I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. And Chris.
Thank you. It's always a joy to be on a Flexa webinar, but this one's one of particular interest. So my name is Chris Woods. I lead recruitment marketing for Mars across Europe, India, Middle East, and Africa. So Mars is a company behind Pedigree, M&M's, Ben's Original. So lots of brands that you will have around you, I'm sure. And it's my job essentially to try and attract talent and help them join Mars for a great career, hopefully.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, everybody. And thank you to our lovely audience for joining us from all over the world, which is super exciting. So to get into it, let's first of all cover off the difference between recruitment marketing and employer brand. So obviously the pure definition is that employer brand is a very long-term strategic initiative of shaping people's view of your company. And I think very often people think about employer brand as only being positive. So only trying to attract people to your company. But I think more and more light recently has been shed around the fact that you also want to be putting people off with your employer brand. You only want to be attracting the right people. And then recruitment marketing sits underneath that, which is more short-term, campaign-driven. Perhaps you need to get loads of people applying to sales roles in Bristol, or you really need to improve the relevance of the kind of talent that's coming into your graduate scheme. So it's much more campaign or specific goal focused. But to bring that to life, I would love to hear an example of some employer brand work and then also some recruitment marketing work that you do at Mars, Walmart and Sapi. Chris, would you be able to share an example?
Yeah, and I always love this question, mainly because we have an employer brand team and a recruitment marketing team. So it's something I'm always having to justify internally as well. And I always say it's employer brand is the blanket approach. So it's how do you sell, in my case, what Mars is like, what are the selling points, what's your EVP, what are the unique parts of working at Mars, and recruitment marketing is understanding that at Mars, we could be hiring an operator in our factory, we could be hiring a data scientist, we could literally be hiring a dog walker in some cases. So the breadth is phenomenal. And it's understanding that each of those people, talent groups, want something different at different times. So it's my job to deliver the right message at the right time to the right people. In terms of, I'm always a bit biased, so I'll try and say this in a non-biased way. In terms of how we do that, I think our employer brand work, we have an incredible employer brand team who I work really, really closely with, and they're about sharing the true feeling. And I love when you mentioned, Molly, around the authenticity, because it's about showing people the genuine truth of what it's like there. I've worked in places where I hated, but people loved. And I work at an organisation I love now, but people hate that people have hated in the past. So it's one of those where it's understanding and their job to sell the truth. And I always say the holiday has to match the brochure. It's my team's job to come in and then understand that once you've seen that truth, really help you understand that role right there, and to tie that marketing and brand back into tangible people stories. And as I always say, it's the right people, right time, right message. Yep. And it's that kind of where traditional marketing meets storytelling, meets brand in this lovely world of togetherness of recruitment marketing.
Awesome. Brent, would you like to share a couple of examples or how you approach the difference between employer brand and recruitment marketing?
Yeah, I really try to just think of it in the simplest terms, where you've got that recruitment marketing is very much objective based. I need something now, I've got to do it, and what are all the tactics and channels and the strategy that I can do to help deliver what it is to reach that objective. The employer brand side of it is a kind of the squishy part for some folks, right? When you're talking internally to certain groups, it's, well, can't you just put a video together and just say how great it is here? Well, I think we're missing the point here. We're missing the opportunity when we just look at it maybe through a narrow lens and what it is. And I think then that leads to your comment about sort of the measurement and the authenticity and justification of what it is that we do as a profession. But for example, I know that in my experience, I've been at Walmart for about 3.5 years, and I've kind of been orchestrating from the ground up one of the newer divisions there, and so that employer brand was non-existent for them. There was the parent, right, the Walmart. Everybody knows Walmart, but then how do you kind of help shape that story for a particular area of the company that's got different personas and different roles and things like that, that group doesn't necessarily think of Walmart for. So those are the type of things to say, how do we then communicate that and to Chris's point, in an authentic way? Because I think there's going to be a trend where you'll start to see people trying to say, well, look at Walmart's doing, or look what Mars is doing, and we need those videos too. And they're going to kind of miss the mark, and maybe we can dive into that deeper. But I think what you're going to have is an opportunity to kind of say, this is who we are as a brand, as a company, what we value. And so we can try to share that and trying to come to market with the right strategy that makes sure that resonates with the right audience, because you don't want everybody. Your recruiters don't want everybody coming and applying. So you've got to be very thoughtful and strategic about that.
Awesome. Really, really useful kind of division of those two things. It kind of feels like we're starting to talk about it in a funnel, which I know we're gonna discuss later. Anna, I'd love to hear your thoughts and examples of how you treat employer branding and recruitment marketing.
Sure. I think I gave you some thought in the last couple of days. I think my focus has been undoubtedly more on employer brand, just because we're so tiny and we're a startup, so very, very different from Walmart or Mars. And because, quite frankly, it's just a team of two at the moment. So no marketing department, no social media, absolutely nothing. So the focus, as you can imagine, has been massively on actually building first the EVP and then the employer brand. But I will say that I think the only time when I felt we did perhaps a little bit of very, very shy and early recruitment marketing was some months ago, when we had to really push hiring for our Vietnam office as opposed to our UK office. And since our CEO was Vietnamese, I thought it was a good idea for her to share her story over LinkedIn and then share our brand new, at the time, careers page. So I guess that's the only example I could give you on actual recruitment marketing, I guess. But yeah, the rest of my work and what I'll be sharing today is employer brand.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point to explain around the size of the company and the stage that you're at will also dictate how you treat those two things. So Flexa, the company that I run, is a startup as well. And from the very beginning, we have been focused on employer brand. And I think that's something that's super important to highlight, is how when you're a startup, you can't pay super well at the beginning because no one has a reason to trust you. They don't know what you're about. They don't know what you offer. You probably don't offer as competitive benefits as a large corporate. So the employer brand and really getting out like your mission, your EVP, why you would want to join is so crucial to being able to attract really good talent. And I know obviously Sapi, with joining Flexa, that was one of the things that you wanted to do, was really focus on being super transparent about why you would join. And we have done that from the very beginning. And I think sometimes I joke and I say we're probably one of our own biggest success stories because we've never spent a pound on hiring. We've never had to rely on anything else apart from our own employer brand on Flexa and the employee advocacy that we have as well around the experience of working at the company. And it is incredible what you can do with very little when you start to build those employer brand foundations from day one.
Sorry, I have to say this because you just said something which I think perfectly aligns it for me.
Yeah.
I think you can't have recruitment marketing without an employer brand. You can have an employer brand without recruitment marketing, but you have to have that foundation of why should someone work at your company? It has to be true. It's the true for any company. And I think I've said this on probably a Flex webinar before, actually, but if you don't think you have an employer brand, you're wrong. It's just,
everyone has one.
Yeah, it's just being said about you without you knowing. Whereas recruitment marketing is building on that to try and attract those kind of broader groups of talent.
Yeah, exactly that. Like everybody has an employer brand because everyone feels something and says something about the place that they work, so they're experiencing it. And that's actually a lovely segue into my next question around the funnel. So it feels like you've got employer brand at that very top, and if we're comparing it to a marketing funnel, it's that brand awareness, very top of funnel, very much like let's get as many people looking at this as possible and then making an educated decision about whether they want to come down further into the funnel. And naturally, you normally have that go into applications and consideration kind of coming through into the middle of the funnel and then eventually the bottom. But it feels like recruitment marketing is the sandwich bit between employer brand and then kind of coming down and applying. Optional sometimes, but obviously makes it much more efficient and effective. So I'd love to hear at your company how you kind of structure your recruitment marketing funnel or just your hiring funnel actually. And what advice you would give or any learnings you want to share about that process for people that are listening and would love to learn more. Brenton, I'll come to you first.
Yeah, I think one of the things is really understanding what it is that you're trying to solve for. So when you start looking at that to say, gosh, you know what, we don't have enough applicants. Great. Well, we've got a strategy. We can try to help open up the top of the funnel here and try to generate that awareness and that consideration, et cetera. But then you're saying, you know what, we're just getting too much drop off. Like we got people ghosting us. We don't know like what's happening here. Like there's different pieces as you structure that funnel and you say, how do we apply the strategy of recruitment marketing? What is it that we can do to try to help, again, that objective that we're trying to solve for? And that idea is so important because that's when you start to show your value in what you do, to say, you've got to come at this with the right strategy and the right lens of what it is that you're trying to solve. And we are those experts that have that strategy and that resource to solve this for you. And so that we can go and demonstrate that. So, but to make sure that we're solving the right problem as those different parts in the funnel are crucial. And then understanding that with the good data that you can collect. But some of that's going to be, we're going to promote open job opportunities and we're going to get people to apply. Your recruiters may not like that, right? You may get a flood of applicants. They can't respond to them. That candidate experience may suffer. That where maybe some of the drop off happens if that's an issue. But each of those touch points, you're trying to get those people more and more engaged and love you more and more and more through every single one of those touch points in the funnel. So that recruitment marketing strategy doesn't end when you just say, you know what, I just need you to apply and we're done. Good. Congratulations. We did it. You've got to make sure that doesn't go lost throughout the process. So you've got to come in with that holistic approach in that funnel to say, how are we engaging them and making them love us more at each interaction? So you've got to understand the candidate experience to say, they need more information here. They need more transparency here. We need to delight them here. And they're more willing to spend more time with you. They're more invested in the job opportunity. And you start to kind of make sure that those people that come through to the other end, it is the easiest job for a recruiter or a hiring manager at that point, because you have led them along the way and even allowed them to self-select out through each of those touch points. So you've got to come with that recruitment marketing structure and that funnel approach, understanding every opportunity along their journey.
And you've got to go through that funnel yourself as if you were
Yeah.
a candidate as well. Like the number
That's true.
of people that I've spoken to, and they're like, we've got really, really high drop off between clicking and then actually ending up in our ATS. I'm like, have you applied?
I love you. I want to work with you, but you've made it so hard.
Exactly that. And so making sure that, every so often you're testing it from different angles. Like, are you coming from a LinkedIn ad? Are you coming from somebody seeing, a brand ad out of home? Are you coming from Glassdoor or Flexa? And then following that journey through and genuinely understanding what the candidate experience is, because it doesn't necessarily just mean that someone's coming through, naturally and taking each stage. Employer brand and recruitment marketing can affect someone's decision in a year when they suddenly remember and they're like, oh, I'm not as happy in my job now. I remember I saw an incredible page or profile about Walmart and the fact that their employees absolutely loved their culture. Maybe that's something that I'll go and check out. So it really is that like long-term shaping of someone's perception of your organization.
Absolutely. And if you're looking at a dollar spend, if you can say, how we're not just spending once on a candidate to get that interest and then they're gone forever, there's a tail to some of that hiring that you can track through time. And again, I think as you start to look to say, how do we show that value of what we do and the investments that are made in the space, you've got to consider those things. Just say it isn't just, hey, let's look at the past 30 days at the start of the month to see how we did on this campaign. You've got to look at that journey, to your point, to say people come in and out of that all the time.
Yeah, exactly. And that does in some ways make it very hard to track and very frustrating, but all the more interesting. Anna, I'd love to hear how, as a startup, you treat your hiring funnel, because I think it's unusual that you've had such a focus on employer brand from the beginning, but also means that you probably reap the rewards.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, hugely excited to be obviously given a blank canvas, right, and be able to run with it. So I really love the idea. But I guess it's important to keep in mind that I did have a little bit of focus on, first of all, increasing volume, because, hey, startup. And with that, I just wanted to make sure that the quality actually keeps up with us. Our CEO has incredibly high standards in terms of the caliber she likes to hire. So I think it would be useful to kind of bring a couple of stats on board. I guess for me it was being able from Jan 2024 to Jan 2025, so in the space of a year, to increase the number of the applicants by 400%. And then we looked at quality, of course, and we're averaging about 70 to 80% of those applicants being scored by our gadget the AI gadget, basically scoring them as 100% suitable to the job. So, that's good enough for me, to be perfectly honest. And much like you, Molly, we managed to actually go for 18 months and not pay a single penny to an agency. So absolutely all recruitment was direct. So that made me happy enough, if you see what I mean. But that was the focus, really. But of course, as you well know, 6 months prior to that, it was building the EVP, building the brand. So that's it from our side, I think.
And that's exactly, as Brent highlighted, of understanding why you're trying to build this employer brand and why you're trying to do this recruitment marketing, because the objectives for Walmart or Mars probably very different for Sapi or Flexa. And so really understanding, is it quality? Is it quantity? Is it a certain skill set? Is it a certain type of person that you're looking for, and solving for that in a way. Chris, I'd love to hear about Mars's approach to the hiring funnel, because I know that there are so many moving parts within it, and obviously we worked on a lot of it together. But I'd love to hear that approach.
Yeah, and this is why I love Flexa, because it allows us to tell a different. Well, it actually allows us to enable candidates to find the story they want, and I think that's the journey we've gone on. We've heavily invested in employer brand for a long time, but recruitment marketing is a new function. So 2 or so years old now, and I guess the way I always describe my job is one of 2 things. One is I don't think this is an official internal description of my job, so I don't know whether I should be careful with this one or not, but one of them is to poke the bear and essentially find out what works or what hurts more efficiently, is the best way of putting it. And the other one is, it's my job essentially to kind of think about how, and I love Brenton and Anna, you talking about like the friction, because it's my job, and this is something I'm really passionate about, is how do we find that friction? Because my biggest frustration is when we say, oh, but this is the way we've always done it, or when we blame like a candidate and you're like, oh, but Brent, you use the example, oh, but everyone's ghosting us, and it's like, oh, the candidate market's so annoying because they're always just not responding, and you're like, have we considered whether it's something we've done or something we haven't done? So for me, it's about just really going at it like it's a customer acquisition journey rather than anything else. And I think historically the recruitment funnel has been quite fluffy, and it's been like, oh, you know, we can't track that. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of stuff I can't track, and in some countries you legally can't track certain things, but it's about understanding at every point what you can track, whether it's sticking a UTM code on something. So I know I probably annoyed you at some point early on, Molly, with like, oh, can we start to add UTM codes on our Flexa profile, because I'd love to understand who's coming from there and like what they're then going on to do. And so it's not just about, or the marketing, I call it the marketing funnel, but the hiring funnel is not just about have we managed to drive applications, it's have we managed to drive some sort of positive behavior, which could be a customer acquisition down the line, and it's looking about it in that sense and kind of thinking it's detached from this fluffy, have they applied, yes or no kind of funnel.
And then I think that's, you know, the accidental conflation there of marketing or hiring funnel. Like, I think that's probably a good thing. Like, it should ultimately be treated as if it is marketing and your end goal is that acquisition or sale or hire. And I think for a very long time, it hasn't really been thought of like that. It was very much like, okay, we will post the job and then somebody will apply and then we will hire them. And that is so backwards to me, because it's like every single time you want to hire, you have to start all of that positive work all over again. It's like, oh, I want to run a marathon in 6 months. I'm going to do that. And then I'll run another one in 6 months, but I'm going to stop running for 5 of them. And I'm going to retrain and do it all over again.
Rather than whole like impressions being like the main tracking metric as well. And it's like, great, they've seen me. Like I could pay a ton of money and stick some
billboards. Buy impressions. You can just buy impressions and
so
more budget, more impressions.
What's the back end of that?
And where are they going on to? What positive outcome is it having, whether it's relevant?
What 700 step process can you remove from your application process that you're just literally paying money for people to get caught in?
The ATS that will not be named. Brilliant. So we've talked about, obviously you need to find your goal of like ultimately, and that goal could change every month, it could change every quarter, it could change year on year, but like, what are you trying to solve for right now? And when I talk to companies, very often there'll be a kind of macro issue or goal that they want to reach, whether that's volume, whether that's relevance, whether that's time to hire, cost to hire. But then there'll also be kind of sub goals within that. And it could be like, you know, we're pivoting towards being much more of a tech company. So we need to change the perception of our company as actually being somewhere great for top tech talent. Or it could be that they're really struggling to reach a certain kind of person, or they're really struggling to attract young people into their grad scheme, whatever that might be. And so I guess my question around that is, how can you, when you're thinking about that top level employer brand and that top level of recruitment marketing, start to segment for the right kind of talent that you want to attract? whether that's just as a whole in terms of changing the perception from tech, or whether that's like we really need people skilled in AI and data, or we need loads more young people coming into retail. How do you start to get granular on something that is so kind of top of funnel? Chris, I'd love to hear from you on that.
This one's like the entire, like, justifies my existence. Because as I said, genuinely, if you go on Mars's Careers website right now, we're so broad as a business. There are so many types of role, and this is, I always say, like, two things which are so pivotal to recruitment marketing. One is a one size fits all approach is the fastest way to be ignored. If you're giving everyone the same message in 2024, 2025, when I read a stat, we scroll, like, that thumb movement, we scroll through like 78 miles of content a year, which is like a phenomenal amount. So
Terrible.
if you're delivering the same message, it doesn't work. It's great to, as you say, Molly, see it and then think about that a year down the line and go, great, I saw that Mars is really, really positive culture. But in order to really capture something, we need to move away from this. So many people I talk about talent as this like monolithic, godlike group, but it's talent groups. So I always say, like, we have, even in our core business, in core manufacturing, making a Mars bar, selling a Mars bar, someone that's making that Mars bar wants an entirely different thing than the person selling it.
Yeah.
And so if we're telling them that one thing, we're kind of maybe hitting them with something they like, but it's around starting with empathy for that person or that talent group and knowing who they are, what they want as a persona, and then using data. So it's data and it's storytelling. It's like, it's heart and it's brain, basically. And so using all of that together to speak to talent as function, it could be career stage, it could be interest, it could be values, anything like that, and personalizing that message we're delivering to them, rather than just delivering this like, it's true and it's authentic and it might work, but it's just inefficient. It's like using, I'm trying to think of like a good analogy, but I'm like trying to reach people and just doing a mass, like Royal Mail. This is very UK focused, sorry, but Royal Mail doing like this mass delivery of letters to the entirety of the UK. I'm not paying for that. I'd much rather pay where I can like deliver a slightly different message on Meta or LinkedIn or Google and deliver it to the right people at the right time.
Yeah. And I think that's exactly it, is being able to segment rather than thinking about talent as being kind of one size fits all. And I think that idea of talent no longer being this monolith and not a one size fits all anymore has become particularly pertinent since the pandemic, because we went from the world of work being pretty homogenous. Most of us went into the office 5 days a week. We worked somewhere between 8 and 14-hour days. And, you assumed pay was, you could benchmark yourself against the market and understand that. The biggest differentiator was job title and pay. Whereas fast forward to now, and most companies will talk more openly about their culture, benefits, ways of working, and there is so much more variety when it comes to where you'll work. And I think, Chris, it was you that said someone's dream employer could also be someone else's worst nightmare. So there's so much opportunity in terms of moving away from that one size fits all and really fine tuning to be able to attract the talent that you know is going to thrive in your organization. And Anna, I'd love to hear from you. Obviously, as a startup, you probably needed to hire everybody yesterday and be moving as fast as you possibly can. So how do you balance, obviously building that employer brand, but then also hyper targeting in some ways to be able to make sure that you've got the right people coming through?
Yeah, very good question, of course. I think the best way to describe what we were able to do was to just really make sure that the EVP is comprehensive enough to give us the opportunity to discuss with candidates at the first touch point and at the very last touch point the things that might be relevant to them. So I'll give you an example. We have a particularly generous parental leave, for instance, right? Which is, of course, attractive if you're someone at that stage in your life, right, where that appeals. So, that's something that you can focus on, perhaps on certain age groups or whatever, or if someone shares with you at the beginning of the conversation, something about those kind of values, family values, and so on. But then, if you're talking perhaps with someone that you'd class as just, I don't know, someone fresh out of uni, they're Gen Z, let's say, you'll probably be more likely to sell the other part of our EVP, which is to do with flexibility, right? With the fact that we've got core hours between 11 a.m. and 4 p.m. So it's really just kind of making sure that we have that flexibility, first of all, in the EVP, and then really using this quite heavily throughout the entire candidate experience. But probably, main touch points, first chat, and then the very last one at the offer stage. So that's kind of what we were able to do. That's about it, I think.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And I think it's such a good point around like somebody that is slightly later in their career is going to want totally different things to somebody that's first starting out. And it's one of the things that we love being able to see at Flexa is who searches for what things. And so we can see from an age perspective or a skill set perspective, okay, well, young people coming into tech are prioritizing these ways of working, these cultures, these benefits. They actually rank flexibility above salary, for example, at the moment, and it's just overtaken that in the last month. So I think having that data and being able to understand what people are really looking for will be a game changer when it comes to recruitment marketing and understanding actually how do we target those different subsections or skill sets. Brent, I'd love to hear from you about Walmart's kind of targeting and whether you actually, and I'm sure you probably have had to kind of ever move from one quarter to another and suddenly you need retail talent, then suddenly you need tech. Like, how are you juggling all of that?
Yeah, there's a lot here. I would say on the segmenting part of it is I can't underscore the importance and the value behind doing the right research, the audience research, collecting the data. I think a lot of people rush into it with assumptions and then just go to market with those assumptions. And I don't think there's enough consideration and thought about context, even when you've got that research. So I think you've got, 4 companies on this call, and you would say, how many of you have offer flexibility? We'd all raise our hands. How many of you have parental leave? We all raise our hands. And if we all go to market when we're all hiring the same role and we're offering the same thing, that's the part here where you really do that analysis to say, what's my competitor analysis? What's my persona research telling me? What are our unique value propositions to say, where is that little sliver of differentiation that would allow someone to click our ad first before they click somebody else? And obviously some of that's employer brand influence, but that's why I want to be so critical, because I think now as I'm seeing it in the future, what's going to happen is the emergence of all of this as a role and as a profession in recruitment marketing, employer branding, is that you're going to see people go, well, yeah, we need a thing like that. Well, yeah, we'll just go out and we'll just do this. And they think they're doing it and they're not getting the results that they want. So I want to make sure that there's the idea of there's a real science behind what we do and why we go to market, and that research piece of it's so important. So anybody who's on here today is like, I hear this, but how do you do this? Like, I think I know what it is. Like there's a lot of great resources that can help you understand how to do this, so that when you do make the investment and go to market in front of these groups, you have segmented and you're like, I know who I want. They value this. We offer this and it's different than that. So we're not just going to talk about this, so we can exercise and leverage those things that are unique. What I'll say about Walmart in particular is, and I think it's to Chris's point, is that we've got so many open roles that might be the same role across hundreds of different areas. And you're trying to figure out, how do I fill all these roles? How do I know who I want? And then you start to really dissect what it is that you're looking for. And you may say, I've got a certain skill set that needs to have search engine optimization for a product manager role. But then this product manager over here, they've got to have, UX experience or AI experience or things like that. So you've really got to understand and know what it is that you're looking for and across different areas. And it saves so much time on the front end, understanding specifics of what you need, not only so you can make the investment in your targeting criteria when you actually do your marketing, but it's also like the employer brand messaging and the value and all those things. So that trickles down to making easier decisions at the end. Again, making it easier for that recruiter and that hiring manager to say, wow, your first in filter was, you knew exactly who we wanted, and that attracted the people who were the most qualified. You put our message in the right channels because that's where that group hangs out. And you knew they hung out there because you did the research on the front end, and the data tells you this is what they're clicking on, this is what resonates with them. So all of those pieces and parts to say, now let's build that strategy for this department or this company or this brand so that we know how to get in front of them. So by the time they've worked their way through that funnel, it is an easy yes for everybody. Yeah, I want to work here. Yes, we want you to work here. It becomes so easy when you put all that time and that effort up front to really understand what it is that you're looking for.
Yeah. And I think that tracking and that data and that understanding is so crucial.
Absolutely.
When
Absolutely.
it comes to
put the time in, do it. It's so important.
Yeah, from the beginning, and then you'll reap the rewards later on. I want to pick up on something you said that I think is a really great point and something I'd love to dig into. Is like you said, oh, if we said flexible working, we'd all raise our hands. And I think 5 years ago, the concept or the phrase, we saw it loads, open to conversations about flexible working. But really what that means from one person to another is incredibly different. Like Anna, you mentioned about your core hours of 11 till 4. We've got core hours of 11 till 3, so really similar. We're remote first. Chris, I know obviously at Mars, you're hybrid. There's so much variety. And I think to that point of like, we can't all just say flexible working and go to market within that. What we have to do is really try to be more transparent about it. And I think often that's been quite an uncomfortable feeling for a lot of particularly corporate organizations of saying, well, if we tell everybody what's on offer, then people are going to come and take the piss. And it's like, it doesn't work like that. People aren't specifically trying to find a job in order to be able to work from home 2 days a week and not do any work when they're doing their hybrid job. That's just not how it works. People will have specific criteria, particularly the best and highest quality talent, because they know that they can go and find that from another organization. And I think that's a really important thing, is you have to see this as not risk, but actually competitive advantage. And by not disclosing those things, you're actually taking a bigger risk because you're not enabling top talent to see whether you're the right organization for them. Blanket statements of flexible working, or, oh, we've got a great culture, just don't cut it anymore. Because what does a great culture mean? Just before we jump into another question, I just wanted to let the audience know that we'll be spending the last sort of 10-15 minutes answering your questions as they come through. So please do feel free to pop in questions in the comments. And if you want to address them to a specific person, please let me know who you would like to answer. Or if you'd like everybody to have a go at answering, then no need to say a specific person. But we'd love to hear your thoughts, or if there's any kind of practical things you're grappling with at the moment. You've got a panel of experts here to hopefully help you with it and answer some of those questions. So please do pop in questions. And probably just before we come to them, when you're thinking about that funnel from employer brand all the way through to a hire, or actually let's think further beyond that, to somebody actually staying and being a retained, engaged and high performing employee, what do you think are the kind of common friction points that you've seen, maybe when you've walked into an organization for the first time or when you're trying to redesign? What are the big mistakes that you see people making? Anna, I'd love to come to you first.
Sure. I think when we're talking about friction points, my mind, as soon as you said that, my mind went straight to the ATS topic. Like it's such an easy win, right? And even within that ATS is just designing that journey to just be a bit pleasant, to not be absolutely painful. So I'll start with that, because I know that whenever I've been an applicant myself, I definitely stayed away from companies that just had a terrible process in terms of actually submitting your CV. So that's one, the ATS. I guess another friction point is maybe just lack of consistency across platforms. So, we're talking here about, let's say you've got a really jolly LinkedIn, constantly updated LinkedIn page, but then when you go to Glassdoor, that tells a very different story, right? So it just needs to match what your careers page needs to absolutely match what your Glassdoor page says, and of course the way your LinkedIn page looks like. And I think consistency is hard to achieve, but I think it is absolutely vital. I know that if if I were to see lack of consistency, I'd think twice about applying. And I guess the other one that comes to mind straight away is, of course, we're talking about retention. That is in itself a friction point. But really, let's just take it back to the basics. A decent candidate experience can really make all the difference. So, do you actually reject people face to face after they've interviewed with 3-4 stakeholders? Because I think that's vital. Do you actually ensure that if the time between one interview and the next, or one stage of interview and the next, is 2 weeks, if that somehow happens, can you keep that person warm? Can you engage with them? Can you treat them respectfully? So it's little things like that. I really think they are such easy wins. And I do think there's a variety of companies that are missing out on this.
Yeah, it's that lasting perception. And obviously, employer brand isn't just about shiny impressions and what people see at the very, very top. It is literally all the way through. And if somebody has a horrible interview experience, they will probably talk to quite a few people about it. And then all of a sudden, all of that hard work that you've done on that employer brand has gone and disappeared, because you'll probably have a load of people that would never consider applying. Thank you so much for taking us through that. I thought that was really useful from a friction point perspective. Brent, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the friction or the common mistakes that you see people making when going through that whole hiring funnel.
Yeah, I can't underscore that ATS comment that Anna made. So 100% on that. I cannot let that go. But that's the reality of it. I think a lot of times it is just speed and transparency. When those two pieces aren't there for that candidate, you lose them. And when you're not thinking of the context of that candidate and what they're going through, and having that empathy Chris mentioned earlier, is understanding you've got candidates who have potentially multiple options. And if you aren't fast enough, another employer will be. Yeah. If you are not transparent or don't communicate enough or communicate the right things, it immediately turns them off.
Yeah.
And they start looking and looking and looking. And I think in a corporate lens, and you've got some big corporations, I work for one, where it's sort of, it's maybe an unacknowledged ego. Well, we're just this company, and so everyone will want to work with us. And so, that's just kind of the way it's going to be. And I'm not saying that's Walmart, but I'm saying that there's a lot of times where you kind of get blinded by what you're able to do, what you want to do, and the reality of what that customer or that candidate's going through. And saying, if we don't do this, if we don't make this choice, if we don't make this easier or do this little thing, we'll lose that candidate to a competitor. We'll lose it to whomever. And so I think that urgency, if we take it as a priority to say that we have to win this talent, we have to go there. And we may lose that talent for some other reason, but if it's what we can control in recruitment marketing, employer branding, it shouldn't be something like that. It should be based on what we can control and help deliver that candidate through and keep them engaged and keep them interested in wanting to work with us, and control what we can control with our piece of that journey.
Yeah, complacency and the expectation that people automatically just want to work for you, I think, is one of the biggest mistakes that we see. Because to your point, the best talent probably going to have a few offers on the table. And it was one thing that we were kind of proudest of when we were building Flexa and looking at the impact of transparency and being very clear and upfront, was we compared a Flexa profile to a LinkedIn profile, same company, just blurred out the leading information. And we did 10 rounds with YouGov, an independent survey company. And 80% of the time, people said that they would rather work for the company that had the Flexa profile over the LinkedIn one, because it had all of the employee verification, was very honest about the fact, we're not about work-life balance, we're about work-life integration, or we are actually quite fast-paced, but really autonomous, amazing career progression, over, oh, we're just something for everybody. And so being very authentic and almost putting people off as well as attracting people does help people to think, this is a place I belong and this is a place that I want to be in. And once you've got that feeling, then you know that somebody is probably, unless someone comes in with the most unbelievable offer, they're probably going to take yours.
Can't control that piece, yes.
Yeah, exactly, which is an uncontrollable, sadly.
Right.
Chris, I'd love to hear your thoughts on kind of the common mistakes that you see or kind of friction points that people tend to fall into.
I think you've just touched on my biggest friction point, Molly, and that's trust.
Yeah.
So it's I always have to get this right. There's a couple of things I say that if I say them the wrong way around, I look like a horrible person. But it's my job and it's Mars's job and TA's job to build trust with the candidate, not the candidate's job to seek trust.
Yeah.
And so the candidate will always be, always say there's a reason why user-generated content, employer-generated content is far better, because obviously, I'm not going to sit on my company page and go, oh, this is a horrible place to work. Everyone is going to say the best things on their company page. And so it's, to your point, Molly, like places like Flexa where we can then see genuine candidate commentary. And that's why I won't name any awards, but that's why I like certain awards over others, because they genuinely take in like actual associate or employee feedback. I think the other one for me is around just, it kind of comes into, Brent, what you say, it's just understanding that just not everyone wants to work there. And so I view my job not as how do I get 1,000 applicants, but ultimately how do I get one? Because my dream scenario is yet to happen. So if anyone has any tips on this, I'd love to know. My dream scenario is I go 1 to 1 to 1 to 1. Like one person applies, one person gets interviewed, one person gets hired, one person goes on to a real successful career. I don't want thousands of applicants because I don't want to waste candidates' time either. If they're the right person, I want them to apply. If they're not, great, we'll keep in contact, but this one might not be for you. And that comes into that trust part. We're not here to trick any candidates into applying for us or anything like that. We're just trying to match job with person and do it in a really authentic way, which is true to everyone and makes all of our lives easier. And it comes back to what I say, the holiday has to match the brochure.
Yeah.
If you see something when you're applying and it's not the case when you start, that is the biggest red flag you can have as a candidate. And you're just going to lose them. You can't, because you've lost trust.
And you do hear those horror stories of people having massive attrition within probation periods. And surely at that point, oh, we've really missold it, or actually this is
something's gone wrong.
Nice work.
Either we're hiring the wrong talent or we're telling the right talent the wrong thing.
Yeah. Thank you so much for this discussion. It's been really insightful. I've learned a lot. So I'll move on to the questions. We've got quite a few coming through, some of which kind of targeted. So in the interest of time, I'll probably kind of hand them to one person and we'll kind of the first question is for you, Brent. So someone is listening here and is really keen to stand out in the application process at Walmart. And so they're wondering, just generally, do you have any advice for a candidate to stand out in that process? And I think actually it's just a really useful question generally, is like when you're going through that hiring funnel, how can someone really stand out and really grab attention? And my first answer would always be apply before you message the person about how great you are.
Yeah, that's exactly right. From that point of view of that recruiter, that first gatekeeper, if you will, yeah, definitely apply first before reaching out to a recruiter, reaching out to me or anybody, any other associate. That's always going to be your first step. I know it's not always a pleasant step, but it is one that you need to do because they're going to ask you to do that anyway, even if you're able to reach out to an associate that's already at Walmart. The second part about that is as you're doing that process, just make sure that you're highlighting those results and making sure that you've got those relevant experience and keep your options open. So look for different opportunities. I know from experience at Walmart, like you may come in under one role, but you've got a world of opportunity in other roles that you can slide into that maybe you're like, you know what, I could do this, and maybe I can do that for 18 months, be eligible for a promotion or a transition to another area. And then you've got something where you have to look at that career vision to say, I want to build something and grow something at Walmart. And so that's an approach. So you kind of maybe have to look at your own career strategy to figure out how you want to do that. But definitely apply first, put in all that relevant experience up there for that specific role. I'll kind of give you a little bit of a cheat here, and that everybody that I've read has been doing this, and that can help you as you start to leverage AI to say, how can this experience, I'm not really good with my resume, I really don't know how to do this well. I can do the work, but selling myself isn't easy. How can you try to help get some assistance and some pointers from some resources like that? That won't guarantee anything, but it can make just be a tool as a resource to make sure that when you do connect with that person, that it'll be putting your best foot forward.
Yeah, and that's brilliant advice. Anna, I've got a question for you here. So would you have any advice for newer or smaller companies who maybe don't have loads of resource or funds to put through their employer brand? What advice would you give, for someone to get started at a very low cost?
I'd say, first of all, this might sound really cheesy, but whoever's working there needs to feel really passionate about the group of people that work there, about the mission of that business and why they're there. And I do think that will save you a lot of money. And then you need to want to kind of mirror why people should work there. I mean, I think that's really it. You need to come there, and then you need to actually always think about it. Okay, we're out, we're having a social with everyone, take some pictures and pop them on LinkedIn. You're looking at ways, maybe using AI, of how you could sell the EVP of that business. Maybe look at any platforms such as Synthesia, maybe look at any platforms that leverage the possibility of creating a very low-cost presentation video to sell your EVP, and that will take you, frankly, 30 minutes to do. That's all it takes time-wise, and is very, very cheap, right? You're looking maybe also at maybe just genuinely encouraging people to be honest, people that work there, but to actually share their views on Glassdoor. Because if you don't encourage a small team to share their views on Glassdoor, you probably will have a completely empty Glassdoor page. So it's little things like that. But also I would highly suggest, I'm not just saying this, Molly, but I would really suggest people reach out to a partner such as Flexa. It's really important you have a partner, I think, in terms of employer branding. That's the first thing I requested budget for. I thought we need a partner for employer branding. Let's not kid ourselves, and let's just work with someone decent. So it's little things like that. I hope that answers their question.
Yeah, I think that's super useful. And to your point, when you said to start with the employee experience, if you've got happy employees, they're going to talk about that. Maybe you could set up some kind of incentive. And I know, Chris, you've focused a lot on employee advocacy and how you encourage people to and really get the word out there in terms of the work that you do and the experience that they have. And so much of it comes from there. And I think you can really win with transparency as well. Really talking about all the great things that you offer, whether that's, linking to documents from your job descriptions, just making sure that information is out there, because if you are doing something differently as a startup, people will talk about it. But a question for Chris. Given your vast range of roles and locations, what are your primary methods for gathering data on specific talent segments when you're looking to fill such a range of positions?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because it's something I'm always trying to evolve. Both from the fact that I don't ever think I've got this right so far. For me right now, it's probably three things. So number one, I really, really try, and this is probably a new one for me actually, but working really closely with our associate resource groups or employee resource groups. So we're lucky to have some incredible groups and an amazing associate in my team, Yaz, who leads connection with those from a talent perspective, is always connecting and working out like what attracted them, what keeps them at Mars, and just generally having a pulse check internally which I think is really important. And that kind of almost informal, it's not a survey, it's just general kind of conversational data where I think people are honest. Market and platform data. So LinkedIn Insights, Glassdoor, Flexa, Molly, you know this, you're always tagging me in data. I love data which tells me what people are thinking and feeling, because without that, it's just a campaigner's guesswork. And then ask anyone on my team, I'm almost slightly obsessive around like campaign feedback loops. So I always want to test different messages. I want to test different campaigns. Like, honestly, sometimes it'll be like someone's smile is slightly different. I'm like, oh, we can A/B test it. So it's primarily those three things. Just it's data that guides the storytelling for me, and just really understanding, just having data that genuinely tells me what people think and feel, and not guessing, because that's the dangerous place to live in, is guesswork.
Awesome. And Brent, would you have anything to add to that? Because I know obviously you have a lot of data as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think the internal surveys or the internal just qualitative research, I think that is the first place you start. So whether you're a large company or you're a small company, start with what you've got. Those people that are there came for a reason. Understand that. One of the other tools that I use are perception surveys for the people who haven't applied or haven't had an interest in working with the company and things like that, to say, why not? What is it? We've got this group over here, and understanding that, to say, we looked inside, we looked outside, and then be able to say, are we making the right connections with the right people? This is a group that we want. We've targeted this group to understand that. But having that visibility and removing more blind spots to say, why can't we get this group over here, and then being able to speak to them specifically, so that you're looking at a lot of different angles to understand these audiences, and there may be some nuances in certain things. It's like, oh, I didn't know in San Francisco Walmart has this perception, and maybe that kind of helps us understand, or things like that you can really kind of dive into. So I'm right on board with Chris. Is that data? Don't undersell the importance of data. Don't go in with your gut instinct, or, well, we did it this way at this company, and we know it's going to be kind of similar. Like that'll only get you so far. That'll never get you the most effectiveness or the best results.
Yeah, totally agree. I think you don't want to be trying to play pin the tail on the donkey with your recruitment marketing campaigns. So final question as a quick fire round. So Olivia said, thank you for this. It's been really insightful. She's actually currently looking into reviewing the metrics and benchmarks that they use as a recruitment marketing and social media team to measure success. So what's one thing that you or your teams track regularly that others might overlook? So I'll go first on that one. And I think a really underrated metric is the people opting into being in your sort of passive talent pipeline. So saving a profile, signing up for notifications when perhaps you don't have the right role for them, or they're not looking right now. And I think that's such an underrated metric, because really there's not an enormous amount for them to gain right now. And it shows how much your brand has resonated with them, the fact that they've basically signed up for marketing communication from the recruitment team. Anna, what would you add as a metric?
Oh, so many things. Okay, so I would definitely look at quality, because that's important. And these days we're so spoiled. We literally can do that with an AI little widget on our ATS. I would also just look at a more traditional metric. You know, how many of your applicants make it to a first interview, and how many of your applicants afterwards make it to a second interview, right? These are really useful traditional metrics. But one of my favorites, all-time favorites to actually measure quality, is offer acceptance. For me, that's the ultimate one. You know your brand is aligned, you know you're doing all the right things, recruitment marketing, brand-wise, and all the rest, when your offer acceptance is high.
Totally agree.
From me.
Chris, what would your underrated metric be?
This one instantly came to mind when you read the question: engagement quality versus engagement volume. So I don't care whether I got 100 likes on something, because if they're from the wrong people, my job isn't done. It comes back to the impression piece. So am I getting the likes and engagement, whether it be likes, reactions, or anything, from the right people, the right kind of roles, etc.
Perfect. And Brent, what would you add?
I would definitely say that affinity, the affinity for that brand, and being able to say, yeah, you know us, but would you want to work with us? You've heard of us, but would you want to spend any time filling out an application, right? So being able to measure that is obviously a little bit outside of, you know, your campaign metrics and things like that. But that again is another tool that I think is so important that maybe is overlooked, to say what's our affinity, what's our perception in the market. You know, we've got a very reputable name, but do people want to work here? And so we can go and get that honest feedback.
Yeah, I think that's such a good one. We've seen that happen so many times, where we did a big campaign around companies offering menopause leave. And one of them was a very male-dominated aerospace and defense company. And we had loads of feedback go through to the client saying it was that campaign that totally changed my opinion of what it would be to work there. Like, I could not see myself in a job at your company, whereas now I can. So it shows that it can be the really small things around that employer brand perception. And are you seen as an employer of choice by the people you want to think you are an employer of choice? Brilliant. Well, we've run over time slightly, and sadly we didn't get to cover every single question, but hopefully we got to most of them. Thank you so much to the audience for tuning in and for such engaged discussion in the comments. And thank you so much to my panelists for being so insightful and forthcoming with all of those actionable kind of hints and tips and your own experience.